Thank you very much for coming out today. As the brother said, some people are hooked up in their stupid bowl today and they're not out here and they're going to miss a great presentation. But we're happy that you all attended, and we're going to start off with our opening ritual. In praise of our African gods and the tradition of our ancestors and a celebration of our African history, African Echoes would like you to join in our opening ritual. To honor our elders, for those Africans 60 years and older, please stand. And we'd like to give praise to them. To honor our children, will the youngest African child please stand or be held up? To honor our sacred African life, with those African sisters that are carrying a child in a sacred womb, please stand. And today, but we'd like to give homage to them as well. For those Africans that are attending for the first time today, can you please stand so we can give you a warm African welcome? Very nice to see you out today. We're here every week at 4:30 in this institution. Please feel free. In the back we have our programs. Every Sunday we present different topics on our history. And if you have any questions after our presenters give their presentations, feel free to come over. We have a platform, and you can have any questions that you would like to ask the speaker to clarify at that time. Do we have any announcements at this time?
That is on the flyer. I hope nobody decides to hit me in the head with no rotten tomatoes or eggs or anything like that. What it was that we were so happy to get this brother, and so we had to come up with the title. And as you can see, it's African Presence in the Lands of the Bible. But what we're going to talk about today, don't run, because we can deal with that part too. His brother's he's done a lot of research. So if there's any questions that you might have about that, or if he included with this particular part of the lecture, it'll be in there. But basically the theme of what the topic is today, the urbanization of Western Africa. His brother, Dawud Watts, was born in Washington, D.C. in 1950. He's an author, an experienced media specialist, educator, and photographer. For 5 years, he traveled and studied in Africa. In 1984, he founded Afrovision Inc., based on his collections of over 4,000 primary source illustrations. He has several books here. I'm quite sure during the lecture he'll be presenting some of the material to you. But at the present time, I'm going to show you one. 100,000 Horsemen of West Africa, the urban heritage of West Africa. Okay, Black presence in the lands of the Bible. Okay, what it was, basically, we knew more about this particular topic here in reference to him than the others, but it will be part of the lecture today. If you so desire, everybody, y'all want that to be part of the lecture today too? Of course. I knew all us folks here was not here for just finding out the urbanization of Western Africa. We want to find out where we was at in the most read book in the world, if we was there. So we have somebody. Say what now? Oh, how many million times did we? Oh, how many? Okay, all right. Listen, I'm not gonna give this lecture. I'm gonna let you do that. Okay, without further ado, here's Dr. Malik Dawud Watkins. Wait a minute. Don't say nothing until I get here to the stage. Read all that, right? Yeah.
I was instructed, is that audible? Yeah. I was instructed not to say anything until I got over to the tape, so I'm not saying anything.
Okay.
Okay, I can talk now. Greetings, my brothers and sisters. There are many ways that we greet each other. Assalamu alaikum is the way that I greet people, many people. I also use Wahotaseng, which is a Khan for the same thing, peace be unto you, greetings unto you. Hotep is a very good and progressive greeting too. So it's not just a matter of isolating one thing as the truth. There are many different areas that are true about our history. There are many different aspects of our history which just the simple exposure to them helps us, it raises us, and it raises not only us, the people around us also get positive growth and positive impact from a true and accurate and positive rendition of our own history. I have to stop because I told people, a few people here, there's this story that centers around what happened to me when I was coming up today. I drove up from Washington and my plans got kind of turned around. I didn't even know if I was going to be here because I had intended to be here. But I ended up having to drive a car with no heat. Okay, now, so you're 5 hours on the road, you know, about freezing temperatures, no heat. So my feet got real cold. I mean, they didn't just go cold, they got cold. I couldn't feel my knees. You know, but I'm the kind of person who tries to find the lesson in everything, right? There's a lesson in almost everything we do. There's something we can learn. There's something we can get out of that. And it dawned on me just when I was coming up not too far from Newark. And I was, you know, I'd been 4.5 hours and couldn't feel my feet. You know, it dawned on me that our ancestors, when they came over to this country, suffered a whole lot worse than that. You see what I'm saying? I mean, this small amount of inconvenience that it takes for us to get together to share historical insight or information into our own knowledge and culture is a very small sacrifice in the scheme of black history, in the scheme of who we are as a people. You know, I mean, when they came over and their feet got cold, what, you think someone said, well, put on this nice pair of warm boots? No, it was very, very difficult for our ancestors in this country. And I think we should appreciate that. And I think we should honor them by discovering what it is that made them and still makes us great. There is a greatness, there is a human quality in all of our peoples that is so powerful that if you take a person from our lineage and you take that person and you strip him of his language, you break up his family, you prevent him from being an independent human being, if you do all that to that person, there is still a dignity. There is still a quality of humanity and love and strength and decency that's going to emerge from a person whose roots are as deep as our roots are. And I think we need to honor that, and we really, really need to understand that. I would like to thank African Echoes for inviting me up here today. This is my first time up here, too. I met Brother Yusuf on the video down in D.C. at a conference, I believe it was in September, on African curriculum, who was at that conference? Van Sertima and Finch and some other people were at the conference. I think Baki Diop's, Sheikh Anta Diop's son, and some other people were there, and I did a presentation also there. And from that, this particular event stemmed. And I'd like to thank Blanche, who I think is still in the back, who helped me to understand that I was supposed to be here at 4:30 and not at 6, okay, which was a good thing too. Today, what I'd like to discuss, I think I'm in 2 mics, I think that's what the problem is. Today, I'd like to discuss a subject which is very fundamental and very important subject. In spite of the many positive things that we see about the ancient history of black people, in spite of our knowledge that the African is the first people, you know, that the Africans invented science and technology, the Kemites, I don't know how many of you understand the calendar. I've been doing research in it recently that's in a publication that we're just revised called The Gifts of the Nile Valley. The Kemite calendar was so heavy that they had a number of calendars. Of course, you know, there's a solar calendar, the lunar calendar, and the stellar calendars. But the stellar calendars that they had were phenomenal. There was one calendar, the Sothis calendar, that had a year, a cycle of a year that's 1,461 years of our years makes 1 year in the Sothis calendar. Now, how long would a calendar like that take to develop? And it was based on an accurate reading of the stars. You see, all of our sense of time is based on our relative position to the sky. When the Earth revolves around once and the position of the sun changes, that's called a day. Right? Right? When the Earth revolves around the sun once, it's called a year. When the axis of the Earth tilts back and forth, you know, up and down, those are the changes that we call seasons. When it's up at the north, it's a winter solstice, it's a summer solstice. When it's at the south, it's a winter solstice. You see, all of these are based on facts, and these facts were observed by our people. I don't think I'm going to have time to get into the black presence in the lands of the Bible today. Next, perhaps if you invite me back, I will. But I want to say the reason why I don't think I'm going to be able to get into it. Because all of these subjects, the subjects that we're looking at, deserve specific treatment. Okay, it's not, there is no possibility. Once you understand the real depth and the real documentary sources that exist, and I'm sure many of you do, probably more than I do in different areas. You know, once you understand that, you also understand that it is not possible to present the material in a half an hour. There is no instant black history. This whole thing about Black History Month is sad. You know, I can see it now with the kids going to school. You know, George Washington Carver, he was black. He was a scientist. You know what the kids really get? Our kids get an image of Africa that is the most negative image that they could possibly get. Take Pepsi Cola. Ray Charles is standing in front of his background singer, sitting in front on a piano. He says, I wonder if they've gotten the message about Diet Coke yet. Then what happens? Big group of people in China. Big group of people. Remember that? And they stand up and they say, right? Then what do they cut to? Africa. Oh, small village. The people go, Then what do they do again? Think about it. They cut back to Asia and a Buddhist ceremony where the people in robes are saying, And that's the message that they're sending and constantly send to our young people about the nature of Africa. Ivan Van Sertima calls it a peripheral view. It's marginalizing Africa. And what has happened is that the part of Africa that we are from, we never see in the media. And it's important that we see it because, first of all, there's something that gnaws at our souls. You know, we have all this knowledge of the great ancient civilizations, the dead civilizations of Africa. We have all this knowledge about Kemet, which is beautiful and important, and it's not dead, but it is not represented by a major group of living people. You know, there's not 20 million people or 100 million people who speak the Kemetic language. That's a fact. Okay? We understand the greatness of all of that, and it is basic to everything. However, what we don't hook up into is ourselves. You understand? In the back of our minds, there is something that gnaws at our souls. And that is, if the African people were so great and knew so much, how could we lose it all? How could we lose it? Is it possible to have so much and to lose so much? Part of the reason that this question even enters our mind at all is because our own positive, putting quotations around it, Pan-African or African-American scholars present an outline of African history which does a disservice to us. That outline can be summarized in the following, and correct me if I'm wrong. I believed this for a long time, but then when I started to travel and study in African universities, I saw such a different picture that I really had to question this particular outline. It goes something like this. The African is the first man. The African is the mother of civilization. All people started in Africa, 1.6 or 4.5 or whatever number you want to pick. That is, conceptually an almost impossible number to grapple with in our sense of time. The very beginnings of everything went Africa. Fine, nothing wrong with that. Two, that the great civilizations of Africa spread out and created the girder, the basis for other civilizations. In the Indus Valley, Mohenjo-Daro and places like that, you find the African presence in Greece and Rome and the British Isles and Scandinavia and China and Japan. You find the first people, in all of these different places, if they're Grimaldi man in Europe or the Peking man in China or whatever, is a black man. Okay, that's the second part. One, the first person. Two, spread out throughout the world. Three, creators of the first civilizations, of the first sciences. Four, the creators of the great empires of the ancient world. If you've ever read Homer, you realize that half the people in Homer and the Trojan War are black. I mean, Ethiopians are still black, right? Okay, what's Agamemnon is considered to be as black as ebony and the handsomest man alive. Okay, so those are 4 elements. I don't disagree with any of them yet. I fully endorse them in my work and the rest. I see them as absolutely fundamentally true. But they're ancient. What happened to the people, the descendants of the Nile Valley? What happened to us? How could it go from the very top to the very bottom? That question is a negative thought that's been planted in our minds. To continue, the greatness, the positive scholars, the African American scholars say the greatness of our people reemerged in the Middle Ages, in Ghana, in Mali, in Songhai, in West African empires, in Mwene Mutapa, in Southern Africa. Okay? What step is that? Well, probably about 6 or 5, right? 5. The next step in that is, boom! 2 slave trades hit Africa. One from the West, where the Europeans were draining out African peoples to work as laborers in the fields in North and South America. And the Arab slave trade from the north, draining people to work in the Muslim lands. Step 7, that because of these 2 slave trades, now I'm disagreeing with this, you got to understand that. I'm not agreeing with this. I'm just laying it out because I want you to tell me if I understand what's being said. Okay, step 7, that because of these 2 slave trades, Africa was depopulated, the people were essentially disrupted, and as a result of this disruption and depopulation, that Africa became easy prey for additional foreign invaders, leading to step 8, the colonization of Africa. Okay, that's a thumbnail sketch of what our positive historians are telling us. Anybody disagree that that's not a fair and accurate assessment? Okay. Now, the problem with that, and I call it a polemic. It is a polemic because a polemic is basically a short statement that tries to conceptualize a larger concept and also lead us to where that concept wants to lead us to. Give you one of the most widely known historical polemics in this country. Christopher Columbus discovered America. Okay, now, Christopher Columbus didn't set foot in the continental United States. He didn't discover the place that was already there. But the polemic is Christopher Columbus discovered America. And we absorb that polemic. And as a result of it, there's certain ways that we direct our thoughts. The 9-step positive scenario treatment of African history is also a polemic. Polemics aren't always bad, you know, but this is also a polemic, and there's a problem with this particular polemic. And I know I get in trouble because people say, you're not supposed to talk about Chancellor Williams and you know, some of the other scholars there because they're the great scholars. Brothers and sisters, we own ourselves. We can study anything we want. If we don't criticize our own scholars, who's going to do it? If we don't go and study what they're saying and study what else is out there, who's going to do it? So I'm not trying to be a critic. I just hope and I pray through this presentation that you will see that there are big areas, huge areas of black history, of African history that are not covered by this polemic at all. Now, how did the information come to us? I'd like to read from the beginning, if I may, because you guys have given me a free hand. I can even read. I don't usually get a chance to pull out sources, but this is our piece, The Urban Heritage of West Africa. It's about to go into reprint, and so it should be ready in about 6 weeks. Now, the beginning of it is like this, and I don't mind quoting this person because it's me. Okay, a quiet revolution has taken place in African history. It is not heralded by large demonstrations and political activism. It is not led by politicians or movie stars. Its message is simple, logical, and relatively easy to prove. But it could challenge some of the deepest beliefs you have or may have about Africa, and if your ancestors come from there, about yourself and your capabilities. Since the 1960s, when the African nations, one by one, overthrew colonialism, one of the very first priorities of the new states was what? Education. There were universities set up in different parts of Africa, and one of the major goals of these universities was to heighten the documentary research in African history. That was a major goal of the universities. I'll give you an example of someone who came out of that movement, Sheikh Anta Diop. Where did Sheikh Anta Diop get the chance to do his research? IFAN. IFAN was founded in 1957, brothers. You see what I'm saying? It didn't exist in the 40s and 30s. It didn't always exist. It was part of the anti-colonial movement that created IFAN. The same is true about Ahmadu Bello University in Nigeria. The same is true about the Université de Dakar in Senegal, and many other universities sent, hundreds of scholars from different parts of the world into the fields to document African history. You know, the colonialists didn't want to accept the fact that African history existed. You know, their studies, to think about it, when you talk about the studies that came out prior to the 1950s, almost all of them were in ethnology, anthropology, everything except history. And there were some scholars, and I forget the guy's name because I want to forget his name, you know, who said Africans have no history. Now, if these two slave trades came in and boom, destroyed everything, depopulated everything, the history went with it, right? But my brothers and sisters, that did not happen. The idea that we have become accustomed to accept that the two slave trades, or even one of them, ruined Africa, is as useless an item as a fur coat on a 110-degree day. And I do believe that the presentation that we're going to show today will help to break down some of that stereotypes. A word about Afrovision. One of the things that I found through the grace of God in my studies is that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of illustrations that accompany historical records in African history. Thousands, not hundreds, thousands upon thousands. I've been able to collect now, since that was written, about 5,000. And I have seen with my own eyes at least 25,000. And I know from what I've been looking for and haven't had the time to do, because I'm also a reporter with the wire service on Capitol Hill in Washington. And man, you don't want to know what this government is doing. You do not want to know, because if you do, something's gonna happen this evening. You don't want to know. But maybe we can talk about that in the questions and answers too. I'd be more than willing and interested to exchange ideas in that area. Okay, these illustrations, and I do kind of talk in a sometimes circuitous way. You know, I go from one subject, but I usually end up not losing the point. If I lose it, you all tell me. Okay, I'm not just standing up here to entertain you. We're sharing this. My feet got very cold today, and I was reminded of the struggle of our ancestors today so that we can have the kind of exchange that's going to help you and me. Okay, so please, if you have some ideas, hey, let me know. I don't mind interacting right on the spot. And if it's something I want to finish, a point I'm trying to finish, let me finish that too. I'll let you know. Okay, so this is like not, what is the word? It's not a lecture format. It's not a call and response either. It's just free form. Okay, back to the illustrations. There are illustrations from the records of African history that will fundamentally change. These are not just pictures somebody dreamed up. Remember, the camera was not really, the lightweight camera, was not really developed enough to take into far-flung fields until about the 1880s, late 1880s, 1890s, and they weren't mass-produced enough until the 1900s for that to happen a lot. So how did people get images of what was going on in other places? Take the example of America. How did the American people learn to read? Primarily through the dime novels, you know, with the pictures of the cowboys in them, and the pictures of the buffalo soldiers in some cases, Remingtons and other illustrated books, or travel logs with engravings, wood carvings, etc., from different parts of the world. They became so popular in this country that they were the driving wedge in literacy in this country. In Europe, the stories that the Europeans were reading about were events taking place in Africa. And so many of the illustrations, and that's the point, see, we got back to the point anyway, Afrovision deals almost exclusively with historical illustrations. All the illustrations you see today, we didn't draw. I'll give you an example. Okay, this is the cover of the black presence in the lands of the Bible.